everyone, welcome to my first video. We're going to be talking about StarCraft history by watching old StarCraft VODs. So that's literally the thing here, guys. This is going to be it. I watch StarCraft VODs. I take the opportunity to spark some memories about some interesting tidbits about history, and we can kind of go on an adventure throughout time. The history of StarCraft, StarCraft 1 as well as StarCraft 2, and a little bit of general esports history, which obviously StarCraft has been pivotal to. Brood War starting what could be of esports in Korea, and then StarCraft 2 coming along with the development of Twitch that really jump-started the next wave of esports as we know it. And maybe go a little bit further into kind of how you break down the eras of esports as we go through this. But, you know, I love the history of StarCraft and esports, and I'm always interested in explaining it. And anytime someone asks me a question, I'm always just like so excited to talk about it. But thinking up topics and then, you know, kind of condensing it and creating a show, if you will, takes a lot of effort, basically, when I really could just be going through some of these ancient VODs, right, that no one is really using anymore, but thankfully you're still up on the good old internet, and I could just spark my memory from this, and also learn a little bit with you guys, because as much as I was around for the beginnings of StarCraft 2, it was very casual for a very long time, right? I was a fan, just like everyone else. And then anything I know about Brood War was really from about 2011, 2012 backwards. I actually was into StarCraft 2 first and then learned about Brood War. But I was very interested in learning a lot. So I have some decent memory. But if you guys also want to contribute with things that you know, and then I can look into it and bring it up another topic of the video, it would be excellent, you know, because I also kind of want this series to be there for people who just want to learn about the history. And I don't think it's going to be very likely anyone's going to, you know, create the book of StarCraft history anytime soon. So hopefully this kind of is a place where you can just be like, I want to learn more. And this can be what pops up and still be fun and educational, but a fun educational. And I get to do what I love the most, which is talking about StarCraft history. So yeah, let's start. Let's start way back in the beginning of StarCraft. As you can see here, I do have GSL Season 1, Round of 64, Match 1, Set 1 on my screen. So just literally the almost the oldest StarCraft 2 footage you could find. It's not, because we do have all the alpha and the beta and the BlizzCons that would happen. But this is one of certainly the oldest established leagues, and that's also what's so cool about GSL. So I guess I'll go ahead and start with that. All right, here we go, history time. So for those of you who watch this right off the bat, you're probably very well aware of what GSL is and its history, because most people watching this are going to be huge StarCraft fans. But for those of you who are really clueless and have no idea and you just recently got into it, here we go. In 2010, StarCraft 2 was released about mid-year. So it wasn't, you know, January, it was August, something like that. And immediately people knew that it was going to be big in esports because Brood War was big in Korea specifically, and then had some, you know, I guess some things going around the rest of the world, but really not as big as Brood War. But StarCraft 2 was very obviously going to be a very big game off a very successful franchise, and there was definitely intent to make it into an esport right off the bat. We do have some of the developers talking about esports in their development of this game. So some people say like, well, there's too many video games nowadays that they want to make an esport more than they want to make a very good video game. StarCraft didn't do that. From my understanding, StarCraft actually did to a certain degree. We do have esports kind of in our blood and our basis from the developers, so that they definitely had something in mind. But anyway, so GSL still going on, actually. Unfortunately, hugely cut this year in funding. If you would like to support the Korean scene, there's tons of places to do so on all these Patreons that are coming up for a lot of Korean StarCraft leagues and the Woody TV StarCraft, and I think, you know, GSL is looking into actually crowdfunding. But anyways, it's still going on. One of the longest running leagues in any esport, where I think Pro League might still be the top, but of course I'll have to talk about Pro League at a different time. I do want to try and keep on track here. I'll certainly be guilty of just kind of going like, well, this happened and that happened and this was happening because of this thing. And I apologize in advance. But anyways, 2010, 13 years ago almost, as it's April now, as time of this recording, It's an amazingly long time. And these guys that we're looking at right on our screen right here, Tasteless and Artosis, have been there since the beginning. In fact, they've been there before the beginning. They were there in Korea trying to make careers for themselves. Tasteless, less so on the pro gaming side. He kind of got situated very quickly into the commentary role after being a semi-pro, and then getting seeing some guy struggling to cast Brood War and being like, hey, I'll help you out, and then he got invited to cast, and it just, you know, starts from there, right? But he was kind of making the connections and being the business guy, and he definitely saw the future bright for StarCraft 2, so he was like, I gotta get on this, whatever gets on this first, which was going to be GomTV and GSL, the Global StarCraft League. Artosis was trying to be a little bit more of that Brood War competitor. I think he talks about sleeping in a closet, eating nothing but rice every day, so he could live in a team house, which was kind of like the most amazing thing that could happen back then to a wannabe pro gamer. But, you know, to be frank, it was very rare for a non-Korean to be very good at the game, and Artosis wasn't even one of the best of the non-Koreans to actually play. There's a couple of others that I'm sure we'll talk about, like IdrA, who actually was somewhat successful, and his story is really cool too. But right now let's focus on Tasteless and Artosis. So Artosis didn't really have a lot going for him in terms of the pro gaming scene, wasn't making a lot of money, hardly could feed themselves. Both of them very, very poor, living in Korea before everyone knew what Korea was too, right? Like now the Korean wave has really taken over the world. 10 years ago, very different. 20 years ago, extremely different. So StarCraft 2 comes along, they say, we got to get on this, they get on it. Tasteless vouches for Artosis. Artosis, not really a commentator so much, again, wanting to be that pro gamer, but coming in as the color commentator, the person who provides a bit of that analysis alongside Tasteless's play-by-play. So this is their first time casting GSL, I believe. There might have been some show matches beforehand, I'm not sure, but this is one of the first, and it's just amazing listening to them talk about it with the context of what's currently happening in StarCraft, which is unfortunately kind of, you know, it is falling a little bit, right? Especially Korean StarCraft, which we'll also get into reasons as to why that is in this type of video series. But let's go ahead and listen in on some of the stuff that they're talking about as they introduce GSL to the world.
Have you down here. We do hope you enjoyed the opening ceremony here. We had a lot of great singers coming over here. We saw an awesome speech from the founder of Blizzard Entertainment, Mike Mornham.
Yeah, and CEO.
Yep, CEO. It's been terrific. And of course, this is the official StarCraft 2 tournament of Korea.
That's right.
That's right. We got people coming down here from all over the world. So it's not just Koreans. Anybody can participate. And we're going to be having many of these, many more to come. So if you guys want to participate in them in the future, check it out, the information at gomtv.net. And you can fly out here to Korea and try to make it into one of these.
That's right, and they're every single month as well.
Yeah,
we're going to have 3 this year and then 12 next year, all with huge cash prizes.
Yeah.
You're going to be seeing so much of us commentating this tournament.
Yeah, we're going to be commentating almost 5 days a week.
Yeah,
it's
wild.
I'm really excited. It's just so awesome.
And not to mention, they end up casting the same league for 13 years. Artosis only recently leaving his post as the GSL mainstay co-commentator with Tasteless. They did try and work things out, but I think it's a little bit TBD for now. So just for the sake of the story, I suppose, Artosis is no longer in person casting GSL, but for 13 years, these guys are actually casting together. Completely amazing. The same league, and obviously being one of the most recognized Archons casting partners of esports in general. So just, you know, they're so young, right? They're so young, a little bit more unprofessional. Of course, not their suit and their ties that eventually they started wearing for GSL. GSL went through a lot of, you know, increasing professionalism. So they have t-shirts, but they're Blizzard t-shirts. So that's, you know, that's something. And to wearing their own merchandise for a while. T-shirts underneath blazers was a huge look in StarCraft. And then eventually joining the Korean casters, you can see in the background a little bit, and really being quite dressed up. So that always amuses me. There was a long period of time where people were doing shirts underneath blazers, and that kind of was an esports moment. There was a couple of esports years where that was very common, and as I guess more casuals and came in and more people got older, and I don't know, eventually got made fun of, so everyone moved away from it. But yeah, it's looking back in the past, man. And this is, again, one of the first days. So they had a GSL apparently every month. I actually don't even remember that. But again, this only started, I guess, in September. So they're going to have 3 more for this year, as well as BlizzCon, I believe, for this year too, which we'll also be checking out. But I'm going to go ahead and fast forward here so we can talk a little bit about perhaps some of the players that are performing, as well as talk about some of the atmosphere in the crowd too. And then I'm going to compare this to what was happening close to this time in Brood War, because that's a really fascinating development that many people don't know about, because, you know, you've only started watching StarCraft in the last couple of years, or the last 10 years, but you still missed out on Brood War and the transition of the, well, not exactly transition, but the development of StarCraft 2 alongside Brood War. So lots of exciting things to talk about for episode 1. But anyways, we do have, okay, this is actually a bit too difficult for me, even as a certified Koreaboo. I do not memorize the player names, their actual names. In Korea, the player names are their actual names, and you'll hear the commentators say their actual name when they cast. For all of the English speakers, and what eventually just got adopted by most of esports, is that we use their usernames. We use the handles, right? So this doesn't help me. I can't tell you who is who. That might be MC. I don't know. But that's not helpful for me. So let's go ahead and just move on and see who they're facing first up. Oh my goodness. First off, we actually do have someone that I recognize, because, hey, right there, it says IdrA. And then these are their names, their handles, right? So IdrA, real name Greg Fields. And then we have Maka Prime, who I believe was the maker of the Makarax, which that's also crazy. This is in. I don't recognize this name, and I don't recognize this name, even though I can actually yeah, I don't recognize that one. So, you know, I don't know who the hell that is. But IdrA is certainly a very recognizable name by everyone, right? IdrA being one of the best non-Koreans, foreigners. Again, such a rare thing for a non-Korean to be good at StarCraft, 1 or 2 at the time, that you would just call them foreigners, effectively, even if you were the same like nationality as them. So he was very good at Brood War, and one of very few who was good at Brood War and actually came to Korea and had some success as a pro gamer and getting a pro gamer license, which, again, we'll go into that in other videos. So much history. Geez, this is already exactly what I wanted it to be. So I'm very excited. But then we'll see how the actual games are going. So you can see the production. Oh my God, look how young he is. Now he's super jacked too. He actually got into like powerlifting. For those of you who don't know, powerlifting or bodybuilding, I'm not sure which one, but he is definitely doesn't look like that anymore. And you could actually see him if you watch his streams over the years. You would see him go from a very, very skinny, kind of stereotypical nerd, sorry, but that's the truth. And then he would be drinking like protein shakes on stream with EG, because the EG guys actually were all into weightlifting. I think probably a lot because of In Control's influences. He did a lot of weightlifting. But anyways, let's go into a game and let's see what it looks like. Xel'Naga Caverns, guys. Right off the bat, Xel'Naga Caverns. I mean, it was part of the first map pool, and it is something. It is a beautiful map, isn't it? Also the old overlay. Oh my goodness. Oh yeah, here we go. So, oh, geez. They might even put up the names. Okay, they don't put up the names, but you would control N, which is still available, and you would put names up here that showed the supply. Because as you can see, there's no other place on this that you can see the supply. I am blocking a couple of things here, but you can't. So if we do actually go out a little bit, you can see that there's the resources as we would expect to the top right, and then you would still see like menu, message log, help up there. You saw the observer tool, which can be brought up with Shift Control O, I believe, nowadays. And then you have the default interface, because new interfaces weren't actually developed, and I guess weren't really considered. The interface was good for what it needed to do at the time, so I don't think there was really anything that really pushed people to say, well, how about we do something new quicker. It took a couple of months, maybe upwards to a year, I'm not sure, to actually have someone say, well, what if we do something different? And then we'll see a lot of iterations of overlays. And finally, what the, in my opinion, the perfect overlay was, which is Game Heart. 3.0, I believe, but that's a way longer. So what you would do is if you got a replay and you wanted to cast it, is that you would have to have something that blocks this, because this would show the replay time, which it still can if you bring it up, but people don't bring it up, right? But you would have to, because you couldn't take it away back in the day. So people would put their branding on here, like in a little box. I had one. Where you'd put your branding here to cover the time so people wouldn't be spoiled as to when it happened. If it was a live cast, then obviously it just shows your perspective, which is not that big of a deal, but still ugly. No one needs to know what perspective you're on. They'll figure it out by watching the game. In the friends list to see how cool you are in the game. And then you can also just generally see that there's nothing else being even on this overlay. Eventually people will start using the blank spaces to put sponsors or sponsor roles or Twitters or what have you. And just right now they don't have anything. So they did have sponsors for this, I do believe.
This or that. So
Yeah.
Sorry, they did have sponsors for this, I believe, but they, I guess, didn't put them on. No one was thinking about that at the time. We've come a long way, is the honest truth. We've come a very long way, StarCraft, but esports in general, about having things that actually encourage people to invest into it, right? It took us forever to actually be able to get teams and their logos going on the games. But let's take a look at the map, which unfortunately we can't do too much more. Things like map overviews or map intros would come along eventually as people continue to push the envelope. There it is. Okay, so they didn't use the in-game default one, but they used a custom one. And oh man, we got to talk about some Brood War history too. I have no idea how my ranting is going to be taken, guys. Please let me know if this is actually still interesting. But so this is the custom one that GSL would make. And now we have to talk about, why do they have numbers on here, all right? It's not because Ji Tae-hoon was on T1, SK-T1. No, that's not what it is. And it's just not a team called Z7 either. What it is, it's Zerg and Terran. So those are the Z and T, and then 7 and 1 would be their spawn positions. And this was very popular and is still maybe kind of popular in Brood War. Whenever you would have the overlay pop up, they'd always put their spawn positions. Now, why they ended up doing this, I'm not actually sure, because clearly, as we've gone along the years, we realized we didn't need it. People can figure it out, and technically we don't even need to say in the bottom left as commentators. We really don't have to do those intros, but we do. So I don't know when they figured we didn't need it. I don't know when they figured they did need to put them in. This would only be really all that helpful if you had a mirror matchup, I would argue, but maybe you guys know why Brood War did this. So they kept it because everything about StarCraft 2, when it released, was going to try and copy Brood War to the extent that it could, kind of. The problem is there really wasn't much to copy in terms of there wasn't anything being advanced in Brood War, despite it being a much older game. You didn't have the same advancements that we would eventually have, such as better overlays. Brood War was Brood War. That's what you had. There were no patches after 2000, 1999, 2000, something like that. And there was no way to really, develop anything further as far as tools go. So what you were copying in StarCraft 2 was coming from a past game that had a decade plus to develop. But, there wasn't anything to really copy. As far as the broadcast itself went, as far as, where do you place your commentators, how many commentators do you have, that type of thing, you could copy Brood War and say, well, they figured that one out. But as far as, this stuff goes and putting Z7 for where IdrA is located, I mean, I think you would just copy Brood War because that's what they did. That's what people are used to. Go for it. And so that will go ahead and segue us into bringing up a scene from Brood War. So keeping in mind, StarCraft 2, 2010, brand new game, successor of one of the most popular games in the world, really, as far as just general impact on video games, but very, very famous in Brood War in particular. And there's a few reasons for that, which I'm sure I'll also just do a specific history video on. But just know that StarCraft Brood War was insanely popular in Korea. And it was insanely popular leading into StarCraft 2. There was no lull leading into StarCraft 2 that made them make StarCraft 2. if anyone was ever confused by that. StarCraft 1 was still going really strong in Brood War. As you can see here, this is a WCG World Championship Games, I think. And it's the finals, Jaelong versus Stork, which are some of the most famous names in StarCraft and some of the, obviously the best players of their race. When it came to WCG, it was kind of weird because everyone could participate, but the Koreans would be the ones to always get to the finals, so it wasn't really a surprise. Whatever Koreans joined in, like that, they're getting to the finals. But anywho, you can see how many people are here. I mean, it's just crazy. And this is after they had a very dramatic, impactful match-fixing scandal that they were still kind of reeling from in 2008, I believe. So, yeah, the betting scandal with Savior, both betting scandals were connected to people with very, ironic names. But that happened, and that did hurt the scene. And it did hurt investors, and it really made a lot of the big investors of Brood War second question what was going on, but it was still absolutely huge. People still loved this game, and you can see how many people are there. But then what I also want to show, besides this, again, the beautiful overlay, right? It's literally 10 years, 11 years after Brood War came out, and they've been developing Brood War broadcast that entire time in Korea, and it's still this is the best they could do. There was nothing else you could do with Brood War. But anyways, I also wanted to show how expansive the game was, as much as possible with the 32 bits that I'm working with. We do have in the mini map, you can see here, at least 4 bases for the Protoss, I believe, right? That's what it looks like to me, about 4 bases for the Protoss. And this going into what could be seen as a late game. We have some Defilers, that's a tier 3 unit being pumped out, and they were also fairly long games as well. I believe this says 20 minutes right there. It was a game that was really well developed. It was fleshed out. You had your favorite pro gamers, you had your favorite teams, you even had probably your choice of preference as far as the broadcasting team went. You could watch it on TV, actually flip through channels and watch it on TV. And it just had some high quality games, and we'll go back and watch some year 2000 Brood War games to really even see the difference there. Whenever a new game is going to come out, it's going to suck initially, kind of. It's going to be fun, but it kind of suck in a different way, right? And here we have Brood War just being a shining example of this massive, sprawling video game with lots of multitasking and beautiful dynamics, and the metas continuing to change. All that good stuff. And all the fans still really enjoying it. And then you're going to go to StarCraft 2 in Korea, right? I'm not sure where this was set, but, basically, let's just call this Korea. And you're going to this game on Xel'Naga Caverns. I mean, can you even get 4 bases on Xel'Naga Caverns? Okay, yes, technically you can, but would you? Not super early on in the game. StarCraft 2 TVP was whether or not you put a force field down on a ramp against a 1 base 3 racks, So just keep that in mind when we think about why StarCraft 2 was not as successful as Brood War, because as much as I'm sure there's also going to be arguments about what is the actual better game, imagine having to go from this super cultural, almost it ingrained itself into StarCraft, into Korean culture, this beautiful game, this beautiful story, beautiful history, and then just being here's a new game. This is what it looks like, and it's a bit cartoonier, right? I mean, look at this. This is before a lot of the graphical changes happened, on Creep. Look how bright that creep is. Holy shit, that is some bright creep spread. It's kind of uglier to a lot of people, even though we would say it's cleaner in terms of watching what's happening. You can notice too, oh my gosh, it's taken from Brood War probably as well, and also Observers were much worse back in the day. They never used this tab. They never put up the production tab or the unit tab, or very infrequently, either because they're forgetting to, or because they're actually experimenting with not doing it at all, because Brood War didn't have those tabs, and people actually found it very exciting to say, oh my god, what's popping out of those eggs? Oh, it's a billion ultras versus a billion, lings. Very different storytelling. So that was definitely something that was experimented with early on, and is occasionally talked about nowadays, but just don't bother. StarCraft 2 people want to see the production tab. But yes, this game looks like it actually gets up to 3 versus 2 bases, and almost gets up to 3 bases versus 4. Almost. Wow. Just, wow, in StarCraft 2 Legacy of the Void 2023, you are default 3 bases, basically. And in the average game, you are default 3 bases versus 4 for Zerg, of course. But back in the day, I mean, IdrA's probably on like 35 drones or something, you know? Just like what even is happening? And this creep spread, it's halfway through a map whose rush distance is probably something like 28 seconds long, and people were like, "Wow, amazing, the mechanics." And it just looks laughable now. I mean, he's not even connecting his natural and his third base. Look at that. That's a gap. I'm just trying to point out, because obviously IdrA was a very good player. He was actually a very high-skilled Brood War player. So he did actually have good mechanics, and he thought that Zerg would be the best race to show off those mechanics. I would argue he was right, but then I would also say that he didn't take advantage of it as much as he thought he did. Anyways, but it was such a, it was, you know, adult versus an awkward teenager. You know, it was not particularly pretty, but it was exciting. No one knew what was going to happen. No one knew who was going to be top dog or what teams are going to come in. Was this going to inject a lot of money into the esports ecosystem? Was it going to help Brood War thrive in some people's imaginations before it was clear that StarCraft, Blizzard was going to make Brood War move over? Was it possible that 2 RTSs of the same name could actually help each other? And what did it mean for the general esports future? How big was this going to get internationally, since StarCraft 2 obviously had a humongous international appeal in a way that Brood War couldn't? It did. Like, everyone you would talk to has played Brood War. Not everyone, but a lot of people have. But just with the way the internet has developed, right? And the way that video games developed and all that good stuff. There's just, you couldn't have the same thing happen with Brood War. But StarCraft 2 ushered in just this sudden, incoming population of people now interested in it. And I guess because it became accessible, everyone had good internet and everyone had some means of watching a decently broadcast game. Whereas if you wanted to watch Brood War back in the day, you're watching maybe, you know, less than 320. You're watching like 160p, and in, you know, Korean as well. And because your friend had a link, not because you could easily Google it or something, right? And this was also helped with the development of Twitch and having a very common place where you could go find your esports. Also, Team Liquid, I think, really blew up around that time. Again, internationally, it just was able to hook itself to esports and the international fan base in a way that Brood War really couldn't. Brood War, very popular in Korea for a couple of reasons, but mostly because of the infrastructure that was set up at that time. But again, different video topic. The point is, a lot of people outside of Korea were like, what is this new thing? This is really cool. I can actually access it. I can actually do this thing. I can watch it. I can get excited. Whereas Korean fans, who were mostly Brood War fans, they already had it happening. And it was better. It was better quality. It was better storytelling. It was better broadcasting. It was just everything they had grown up as well with that they still loved. Why, you know, are they going to really move on to this? So, yeah, I think that's really important context, because the debate of what is a better game will never stop. And it's not that Korean people are just smarter because they prefer the better game. Which may be some people's arguments. There's a lot more to it. So I think this will have to do for our first video, because honestly, it's going to be like 29, 30 minutes long. There's probably no cuts here. But if you guys enjoyed it, then yeah, let me know. And maybe I'll try and focus up a little bit more in the future. But I am really excited to continue doing this. I could not delve into every detail I wanted to just in this one video alone. So I think there's a lot more cool things to come. So like, subscribe, follow, all that good stuff. And I'll see you for more, whatever I end up calling this. I've actually decided, but more of these. Bye, guys.